A few more speakers coming up this afternoon. We also have some awards coming a little bit later on. Do remind some of the folks who just came in. We do have a couple of after parties going on. We're at Ferg's Live and also across over in Harbor Island as well. We'll tell you about those a little bit later on. Next up to the stage, he's represented Pinellas County since 2010, first in the State House, and then since 2012 in the State Senate. He's a champion of innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome State Senator Jeff Brandes.
Good afternoon. It's great to be with you. Florida is a state of 21 million residents, expected to grow by another 6 million residents by 2030. This year, we'll have 116 million visitors to this state. And we have 3 soon-to-be preeminent universities in both University of Florida, Florida State, and soon USF. Creating an ecosystem of innovation and technology is something I've been passionate about since I was first elected in 2010. When you're a member of the Florida House, you're a member of a group of 120 people, and you trickly try to figure out how to distinguish yourself amongst that group. So I turned to the single source of what I think is all great knowledge for legislators, TED Talks, and watched hundreds and hundreds of TED Talks until I came across Sebastian Thrun in 2011 talking about the future of self-driving cars. And that was the idea that sparked Florida's journey on legislation towards being one of the best states in the nation, thinking about technology and policy for the future of transportation and mobility. You can see this playing out today, as just a few weeks ago, Ford announced that it was deploying self-driving vehicles as a delivery service in Miami. You can see it in Voyage, partnering with the villages to do self-driving services in the retirement community. You can see this in Babcock Ranch, where Florida is a leader in having a solar-powered city, but also a community designed around self-driving cars. We can see this at the University of Florida, where they have a self-driving shuttle. We're in Tampa, where just last week, May Mobility was here with HART, looking at opportunities in the Tampa core. The opportunities for mobility have never been greater for this state. And so it's exciting for me to introduce probably one of the what's the great word? The most innovative, you use that word too much, let's say. One of the most profound companies to come along in many, many years that has transformed the mobility space in incredible ways. And that is Uber Technologies. You've seen them. My first experience with them was 4 or 5 years ago when they first came to Florida, when they were just growing outside of California, and they wanted to grow into the marketplace. And over the last few years, we've been able to remove burdens and barriers. We got rid of the Hillsborough County PTC, which was a huge challenge for us to deal with. And we created a seamless opportunity for people to take Ubers between communities. Because we have over 400 cities, and under current law, you could have blocked in any one of those cities Uber from operating in your community. So now our 116 million tourists can take an Uber seamlessly anywhere they want in the state, because our residents expect it, our business community requires it, and our tourists deserve it. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Kasra Moshkani, the Southeast General Manager for Uber Technologies. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Senator Brandes for being a champion of innovation and for being one of the national leaders in advocating for policies that literally change the way that people move. And thank you to the organizers of the Innovation Summit for inviting Uber and me on behalf of Uber to be here with you all. Today I want to talk about the future of urban mobility and what it means for cities and what it means for people who live in cities, about how we can cut congestion, pollution, and parking while making transportation accessible to more people by using the private car for public good. And how we can achieve that by using new technology with today's existing infrastructure. Let's start with the car. It's easy to demonize the car. After all, there are over 1 billion of them, one for every man, woman, and child in the US and Europe combined. But the problem actually isn't with the car, it's how we use them individually. Next time you're at a red light, take a look to your left, take a look to your right, and chances are you're gonna find one person in that car, the driver. When we drive alone, we're in good company. Sadly though, that is just 5% of the problem, because these hunks of steel sit idle for 95% of the time. For every car that exists, there are 8 parking spots. In some cities, up to 1/5 of the land is used for parking lots and parking spaces. That is 12 times the size of New York City. And there's a tremendous opportunity cost associated with parking that we typically forget about. Space used for parking lots and parking spaces is space that's not used for parks, for schools, for affordable housing, for bike lanes. And today, in most cities, building more parking is actually encouraged. New homes, new offices typically have a minimum parking requirement, even if it's not necessary, and even though it's really expensive. That is the insanity of how we design our cities today. Now, to be honest, when the founders of Uber created the company, they weren't thinking about any of this. They were just fascinated with the idea that you could pull out your phone, hit a button, and a car would show up. But as Uber took off and as ride sharing became a thing, one of the things we realized is that transportation as it's existed has been inefficient, insufficient, and unequal. But the good news is that there is an alternative to a world that looks like a parking lot and moves like a traffic jam. It's a world in which people share rides and take mass transit. How do we get there? By providing affordable and reliable alternatives to individual car ownership. Let's start with reliability. Uber has proven that ride sharing can service every single corner of a city, including the parts that other means of transportation cannot. What you're looking at here is Los Angeles, which covers a metro area over 4,000 square miles. Push a button in Los Angeles, and you'll have a car, no matter where you are, what time of day it is, in under 10 minutes. So it doesn't matter where you are or where you're going, you can always get a ride. With Uber, there's no destination discrimination. There are no refusals because of what you look like or where you live. Doesn't matter if you're in the Tampa Bay suburbs, doesn't matter if you're in downtown Tampa Bay, you will get that ride. Over the past 6.5 years, we've learned a lot about the future of urban mobility, about cities and the people who live in those cities. From Sydney to Summit, New Jersey, we've gotten to know the cities and we've learned that local leaders, urban planners, civic communities are all trying to crack their city's commutes and figure out how to best invest in new infrastructure. We've received consistent feedback from these cities that access to our aggregated data on how people move within cities can actually be really helpful in maximizing existing infrastructure and making decisions about where to invest for new infrastructure. This January, we launched a tool called Uber Movement. It is a free, publicly available website to help urban planners make informed decisions about our cities through the data about how people move. We hope that Uber Movement can play a role in helping cities grow in a way that works for everyone. We're going to watch a video.
Cities are growing and changing, and this growth has an impact on how we get around. To help address these challenges, we are introducing a new product, Uber Movement. By leveraging anonymous GPS information from hundreds of thousands of online Uber vehicles, Uber Movement provides a new way to show how traffic is really moving around your city. Uber Movement was designed in partnership with urban planners and transportation professionals, and provides powerful tools to analyze traffic changes over time. Over days, weeks, and years, patterns emerge, and help inform decisions for your city. Uber Movement offers access to the insights you need to make smart choices for your city today and tomorrow.
The synergies that we see today between ride sharing and mass transit are happening purely organically. But as the American Public Transportation Association found recently, people who ride sharing tend to buy fewer cars and use their cars less, and they tend to take the metro or the bus or the subway more. City transit systems provide an important mobility solution. But the fact is that they can get to your doorstep. And that leaves many neighborhoods underserved by reliable and affordable transportation access. Uber extends the reach of public transit by making that reliable service that people need available for that first and last mile. That's why so many transit agencies across the country are increasingly turning to Uber for some of their toughest problems as it relates to transit. One of our more exciting partnerships is actually with the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, where we have two programs. One of them is a first and last mile solution, essentially meant to complement existing public transit. And another is a late shift transportation disadvantage program for those who may not have access to that transportation service and may not be able to afford it. The partnership has actually been a really big success, and we're excited in the next couple of days to announce something exciting about the future of that partnership. So, we talked about affordability and reliability. Uber has proven that ride sharing can reliably serve a whole city. But what about affordability? That's clearly important as well, because people will only give up their cars if there's affordable and reliable alternatives to individual car ownership. Now, policymakers have for a very long time tried to figure out carpooling, starting with the Second World War, then again during the 70s oil crisis. But the fact is that figuring out carpooling at scale is actually really, really hard. Well, a couple of years ago, we had a breakthrough where a couple of our data scientists and engineers noticed that there were a lot of duplicate Uber rides. A lot of people going from point A to point B at the same exact time. And they asked the question, can we use mobile technology to conveniently match these people in real time? And instead of one ride, and instead of two rides, have one. Instead of three rides, have one. We often joke at Uber that we strive to make 1 plus 1 plus 1 equal 1. And if we could achieve that, that would be good for passengers who are sharing their ride, and therefore it's more affordable. It would be good for drivers who are spending more of their time with passengers in their cars, and it'd be good for cities. You have more people in fewer cars. But the question was, would people actually carpool for a discount? And what we've learned is that the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Because it's not sharing that's the issue, it's price and convenience that matters most to people. What you're looking at is San Francisco here, where people are choosing Uber Pool up to 50% of the time. On the left is a map of what rides would look like without Uber Pool. And on the right, you can see those matches actually being made and people choosing to share their rides. And the impact is clear. Today, Uber Pool accounts for 20% of Uber trips globally. And we've seen a lot of this impact in Florida, in South Florida, where we launched Uber Pool about 2.5 years ago. There are 22 million vehicle miles traveled that have been saved, 433,000 gallons of fuel that have been saved, and 3.8 million kilograms of CO2 that have not been polluting our ecosystem. Next month, we'll actually be releasing a first-of-its-kind report detailing the economic impact that Uber has had specifically in Florida started nearly 4 years ago. One of the interesting things we found out is about how people use Uber in Florida. And the use cases, the reasons that people hit that button and request a ride are actually pretty broad. This graphic here represents 4 categories. So people use Uber for commuting, for business, for leisure, and for personal trips, which include shopping, which include healthcare, school, and childcare. And about a quarter of these trips are actually intermodal connections, connecting to other modes of transportation. And the ability of Floridians to connect with and complement other modes of transportation is evolving with the integration of Uber into people's everyday transportation habits. Now, we're already seeing attitudes of individuals with regard to car ownership change, because when people are given an affordable and reliable alternative, they're actually happy to take it. In the US, 10% of Uber riders under 30 say that they've either given up their car or they no longer plan to buy one. If you have a child or a nephew or a niece, what do you think the odds are that when they get to age 16, that the first thing they're going to want to do is get a driver's license and drive their car? I would say pretty low. I would actually say that most children who grow up in today's cities, when they get to driving age, may never even learn to drive. And we're just getting started. Today, ride sharing accounts for less than 4% of miles driven globally. According to a study by Morgan Stanley, by the year 2030, we expect that to be over 25% of miles driven. That future is within our grasp. It's one where people share rides and they take mass transit simply because it's a better option than owning a car. It's a future where people have equal access to affordable transportation, where they spend less of their income on their commutes and their cars and less time stuck behind the steering wheel, and where parking spaces are replaced by parks and affordable housing. Taking that one step further, a recent study by the International Transport Forum of the OECD found that shared self-driving service could actually reduce the number of cars on the road by 90% or more. With that, our cities truly would be unrecognizable, with so much of the stress and cost of city life gone. So places that embrace ride sharing today will have a natural advantage when it comes to self-driving technology. Partly because individually owned self-driving cars will create the same congestion challenges as cars today do. So we need to get people in the habit of leaving their cars at home, of sharing their rides, or better yet, not even buying cars. And given that self-driving cars will initially be pretty expensive, sharing them across multiple passengers will help reduce that cost of rides, ensuring that the technology is adapted more quickly. This is our ultimate hope for the future. One where every journey can turn into a shared journey using a combination of ride sharing and mass transit. And that people will use these services not through coercion, but through choice, because sharing will be cheaper and more convenient as an alternative to individual car ownership. Mass urbanization is one of the major defining trends of our generation. There is so much that is great about living in a city today, and by embracing shared modes of transportation, we can make all cities less congested and polluted, with more space for people and for parks, and where everyone, wherever they live, and wherever their income, has access to affordable, reliable transportation. And we're seeing this here in Tampa Bay. Mr. Vinnick's plans to transform empty parking lots into commercial, residential, and green spaces is just one example of how we can work together to make the future of Tampa Bay like that. Thank you.